what role do states even play today? And are they maybe going to play a different role in the future? Are we individuals, the cosmopolitan people, taking back the responsibility and are trying to actually bring together a bit of a different consensus? As in, what type of a community does the Web3 really present?
Welcome to Grokchain Conversations. This podcast is presented by a multidisciplinary group of legal, financial, and technology professionals to meet and discuss today's most pressing questions around the use and governance of the blockchain. Through roundtable dialogue, we will provide listeners with a full spectrum of views on where this technology is today and where it might be leading. The information provided on the Grokchain Conversations is for educational purposes only. The information provided does not constitute legal, investment, financial, tax, accounting, or any other professionally licensed advice. The views expressed here are those of the individuals, not those of their respective employers or Grokchain.
Welcome to Blockchain Conversations, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about blockchain technologies in the shadow of war. We had some introductory conversations amongst ourselves to talk about a few things. And one of the things that Anja was talking about that interested me was the idea of how donations now are working with blockchain technologies in the face of the Ukrainian war. And I was hoping, Anja, that you could start us out by talking a little bit about that, what you're seeing from your side of things.
Right. Yeah, right on. So a couple of things that happened right away was, let's say, Ukrainian government getting its own crypto address where we could, send the funds, as in our Bitcoins, Ethereum, etc. And then there was a couple of organizations also publishing and joining the efforts. There was a lot of energy invested into finding the nonprofits and finding proper channels through which we could send crypto, not only the fiat money. And it's quite a new initiative. I mean, I'm not sure if we've actually seen that before much. I know that there is plenty of initiatives with nonprofits going on around Europe and possibly throughout the rest of the world, where people are gathering different equipment, as in clothes and food and stuff like that. But when it comes to money, the wire transfer might, again, take time. And it's not really appropriate to send the money over to one person's account and then wait for yet another 3 days or 5 days for that money to be sent out to another bank account. But here we're actually able to identify new organizations, mostly nonprofits. Some of them, of course, are raising the money also for the army. Apparently that's the priority. But the nonprofits also are raising the crypto and are spending it. And the beauty of having crypto transferred across is that it really is traceable. So if I send it over to one organization and that organization sends it over to yet another nonprofit, and then this crypto is being spent for purchasing food and clothing, then if the store actually accepted crypto, we can track the whole transaction flow, and we can actually see that the money has been spent for the purpose of buying someone clothes or buying someone the food that they need in the time of war. So that has been happening with plenty of different organizations, and including doing good. I mean, people are finding new ways, right? So there has been Unchained Fund, for example, and Endowment, and a couple of other crypto initiatives that have existed before, especially for the purpose of having these donations happening across in crypto. But there has also been different ways of how we might support these social causes. And Doing Good has been existing before with this idea that every single NFT transaction actually contributes to a social cause, and hopefully we can trace the impact, the social impact that we're having. So when the creator has published and sold their NFTs, there would be royalties, but behind the royalties or along with those royalties, people on the other side would be getting the money to support those social causes. And at the time of war, Doing Good also shifted the attention and said, okay, let's create drops, let's create NFTs that are actually going to be supporting the social causes in Ukraine and are going to be sending the money across to those who actually are fighting the war or who need that money to be traveling, to be migrating, to be actually trying to survive through these times. So there has been plenty of these types of partnerships. We've also seen that the government of Ukraine has raised 5 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but altogether, I mean, there is Marina. We've been just talking about that, about $50 million dollars gathered for this Ukrainian initiative alone, and I think that that's plenty of money. And going for these types of social causes, it's a positive story that can be told for the crypto overall. Because I think that there's too many stories and too many articles being written about, how we have crypto scams or how we're dealing with the crypto regulation, how there's not yet enough attention being put towards how we protect investors or how we protect the consumers on the other side. But not many people are actually talking about the positive side of what crypto can actually bring to us.
Yeah, it's exciting, the kind of fraud protection openness you're talking about, but it occurs to me also that there's a real opportunity to kind of trace the efficacy of the donations, because you can look how it's being spent. There might be ways to even examine it and be more efficient, to change patterns as they go along or shift where the donations are coming, right?
It goes both ways. So first thing that actually happened was that there was Ukrainian DAO that was created very early on, and one of the things that was sort of concerning was that the founding members of the Ukrainian DAO was Pussy Riot, and now Pussy Riot might actually have a terrorist connotation to it, to the organization or to the individuals that actually present that organization. And if you are Russian and you're sending the money and that money track is actually visible and is online and is traceable because it's being put on blockchain, and then somebody can actually identify who had that crypto account or who was the one sending the money. And if it's a Russian person, then that Russian person along with their families is actually endangered, as they're sending the money to someone in need, but also that person might actually be the one going against the Russian politics. So yes, the transparency is welcomed because now we can actually track where the money is being spent. But on the other side, it actually breaches the privacy of the person that sends the money. And if that privacy is also sort of connected to political sanctions or to the list of individuals that should not be sending the money or that should not actually be making these types of transfers, then yeah, the privacy is a bit concerning here. And I think that to some extent, the crypto environment has not been loud enough about that too. So transparency is being advocated, and we've been talking about it quite a lot. But when it comes to privacy, at one point we might actually be, sending the money to those types of currencies that allow for different types of signatures. And I'm pretty sure that Fabrizio is going to enlighten us on that topic as well. So there are means to prevent that privacy being disclosed. Although, at the same point, these means might be also used to launder the money or to send the transactions and to send the funds to those who really should not be getting it because of sanctions again.
As a practical matter, it seems like you have to have a lot of knowledge to figure out that original DAO was linked to Pussy Riot. How would the average donator figure that out?
No, it was published on the website. They were pretty transparent about it. It's just, whether the Pussy Riot actually rings a bell or whether you know the story behind it or you don't. But then again, I don't necessarily believe that there's plenty of these people in crypto that we can just, I don't know, put into a basket of regular consumers. We do try to educate people that they should do their own research before investing or sending the money and making use of the crypto and blockchain overall. It's not that easy to actually just open up a crypto account and then send money across. And if you are spending more than $100, you should actually be making some sort of a research before you make that transfer. It's not as if you're calling your bank and saying to a broker, hey, make that transaction for me. You're doing it yourself. And having your own wallet account or having your own funds being transferred, you should do the research on how that's going to be transferred. And with Marina, we're constantly, saying to people, go ahead and read the terms, see whether there's a company behind it, and see whether you do have some of the legal representation, or at least some risks are being covered because you're not sending across the money, or you're not using a platform that is not even incorporated somewhere. And if it is incorporated, then maybe check where it's incorporated. So there's legally speaking, there should probably be more education or awareness in this space. with regard to how you should do the research yourself and how you should protect yourself from actually making these mistakes. But then again, I don't believe we can just simply talk about regular consumers.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting point too, that there's a steep enough learning curve on using this as a peer-to-peer, wallet-to-wallet thing that it may shake out some of it, but education doesn't count for everybody. we gotta hope to educate them. Now, Marina, I was wondering, as we talk about, well, I wanted to ask you what you're seeing about changing behaviors in the blockchain cryptoverse based upon the Ukraine war. Are you seeing behaviors changing in what people are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that there are like two major changes. And of course, I'm going to speak from a Eurocentric view because this is the field that I'm working in. But first, as Anja said already before, what we are seeing in this conflict that is connected to crypto or Web3, if we call it like this, it is unprecedented. So nothing like this happened before. And it's like, I would say it's an extraordinary situation that we see today. Of course, like we think that, you know, everyone knows about crypto because we are just surrounded with people that are into this space, but seeing somebody from the government of Ukraine tweeting about airdropping, I don't know, tokens or airdropping NFTs or posting their public address for everyone to send crypto. I think this never happened before. So that's completely going into, I would say in a way, into a mass adoption scene. And of course, we know that many people in Ukraine, they are very tech literate or crypto literate. I think that all of the crypto scene and the project have at least known some, I would say mainly developers that are from Ukraine. And I think this is also why everyone is so concerned about the situation and everyone wants to help. So we are seeing something that is changing on the, I would say, not only on a personal level, but on the level of countries and how international politics is done. I think this is quite fascinating. The second thing that is very important, at least for Europe, I will do a very short intro, but the current crypto situation in Europe when it comes to regulation, it is very important and it is very intense. Right now, we are in a finalized state of adopting the markets and crypto assets regulation, which is a regulation that is actually going to define the future of crypto in Europe, and not only for Europeans, but for everyone that wants to offer services in the European Union. So this is a very important thing. The second is that it's also beginning of discussion around the AML and counter-terrorist financing rules. In Europe, there's a whole package around this. And of course, a part of it is also discussing about crypto and talking about everything that Anja already said. So what are the rules when we are sending crypto? What kind of wallets are we using? Is there any obligation for crypto as a service providers to share information and do KYC on users? And the third one is the energy consumption of especially proof of work blockchain. And all of those things have already been debated a lot in the last months, but they have also been affected by what happened in Ukraine and with Ukraine and Russia. So the first response is from I think it was from Christine Lagarde, yeah, and also from the foreign minister of France, because France is currently leading the council, so it has the presidency over the European Union. They said that we need to have this regulation in place, so markets and crypto assets regulation, as soon as possible. This will also help us navigate what kind of sanctions and in which way we would want to implement as European Union. So this is something that I think it's quite important. The second one is, of course, looking into how the future of transactions with crypto, within crypto will look like. Probably most of the crypto asset service provider will need to exchange information between them. So it's not only as we discussed already today, transparent, and you can see which wallet sent what amount to what other wallet. But the service providers will need to also exchange information on this. And what is, at least from our point of view, very concerning is that some wallets are called unhosted wallets, which means that they probably are already seen as kind of a maybe suspicious, just because nobody has their private keys except the person that is sending the amount. And the third one is, of course, everyone knows that we have a big energy crisis, not only last week or in the last 2 weeks, but months before. And this is also why we have the push from the European Parliament, especially, and from the Greens, to ban or limit the proof of work blockchain and all the service providers that are using them. So the latest news is actually that this has been changed a little bit and is not that, I would say, tragic for the proof of work applications. But everything that is happening at the moment in Ukraine seems to have a very important aspect also, and very important like weight in the crypto regulation, and also how everything will look like in Europe in the future.
It's interesting you mentioned kind of an ad hoc sharing of information. Do you see it following kind of what's happened in the payment processing and credit card world, where in the US, it's not necessarily, they don't necessarily have a direct regulator for their industry, but they began sharing protocols and information and kind of tentatively adopting KYC standards. It's its own thing with its own privacy standards in the US. Is that what you see forming, kind of a self-regulatory entity, or is it going to come top down from the EU?
It's definitely going to come top down from EU. You're right. We have heard a lot of discussions last week also with Metamask and Infura and other limitations that certain citizens of certain countries have seen. What is happening in Europe is that we have a whole package on AML and CTF. And one of the regulations is also setting a new authority in EU that would be a centralized one and would regulate all the AML related issues. And also we would have, I would say, a more equal situation, because right now in Europe, we have different regulation when it comes to crypto. Some countries like Germany and France, they do have a law on this, and they already have registered crypto asset service providers that are aligned and are compliant with their AML regulation. But of course, most of the other countries, especially the smaller ones, they do not have this regulation. So what's happening is there's going to be more legal clarity, but at the same time, it means that if we do something wrong, it will be wrong for a really long time, as it usually happens in Europe, and it will be wrong for every country. So this is why, also you mentioned before, the European Crypto Initiative, we are talking to the regulators, and I think it's very interesting to see how all this like technical infrastructure and understanding of it, it's so important when we write regulation on these topics, because if we do not understand how things work or how the business models work, at the end of the day, the paper will not help us, or would even hinder whatever innovation or whatever new businesses are created in this sphere.
Usually you mentioned AML. Usually that goes hand in hand with what we call in the US, know your client information. Fundamentally, that's got to be different in the crypto world. Is that one of the technical issues you're talking about, or what is the know your client kind of critical mass you see being reached in the EU as this regulation's bubbling up?
Mm-hmm. So what is happening is the whole idea of the regulation is that if there's the same situation, it would need to be regulated in the same way. So this is also a principle when it comes to MiCA and when it comes to the AML regulation too. But at the same time, we've seen some of the things, especially we call it the travel rule, which means that different crypto asset service providers will need to exchange information between them. So if there is one service provider in Europe and it will need to exchange information in the US, and here is also our concern to what kind of laws is the, for example, US or maybe Asian or African crypto as a service provider bound, and if it's different, especially when it comes to privacy from the European one. And the second one is especially the problem around the unhosted wallets. So the wallets that for example, Metamask, I think Metamask has more than 20 million users at the moment. And it means that Metamask, as it's written at the moment, we would need to exchange information, so KYC information, with other service providers when it comes to transactions in Europe or with the European citizens, which is, we know, impossible because Metamask does not have our private keys and they do not have, they cannot link the public address with an identity at the moment. And this is where the debate is, I think, very interesting. And it just shows that it's so early in crypto in a way. In the other way, it's too late, or something like this. So I think that it just, as Anja said, education, and in a way, coming together and trying to understand and talking the same language in a way. When we are discussing with regulators, and then of course the people that are working on projects, we see that we're kind of translators, because it's so hard just to understand something that you've never seen before, and even understanding the core of the technical parts of whatever innovation is out there and is used by regular people.
Yeah, it's tough because it may, among other things, force a re-understanding of digital identity, right? Different from the way government is usually regulated it. The large social media companies have a very different idea of what our identity is and how we to reduce it down to our behaviors and where we've been and what we've touched. And at a minimum, I imagine MetaMask has IP addresses, and they may be obscured by VPNs or other things, but the kind of constellation of those points still sets forth an identity. And wrestling with what that means and educating people is not going to be a quick thing. The idea of digital identity is still not settled in anybody's mind, I think, in the world, but something we're going to have to deal with. So, Alessandro, since we were just talking about the bubbling up of EU regulations, I know you've been closely following what's been happening in the US in parallel. I was wondering if you could talk to us briefly about what we've seen when it comes to crypto regulation and actions in the last week or so.
Well, the regulations, I think, are quite similar for the most part. Now, there was this executive order yesterday signed by President Biden, which essentially is asking most agencies within the executive branch of government to do studies and to bring some reports to their attention so that they can, everybody has the same level of information. This is a new industry that, like all new industries, needs to shake out and adopt, through a process of maturation, existing regulations and laws.
Yeah. I mean, something I would add is beyond regulations, what there's been a lot of U.S. activity on, and this goes fundamentally to the U.S. approach to these things, is a building of kind of a punishment apparatus for various aspects of the cryptocurrency world. Seeing some action on the IRS front. We've seen task force being set up in our Department of Justice, looking for crimes related to this. All of this has happened in parallel with the kind of mass adoption event that I think Anja was describing with the Ukrainian war. And it's that's going to be fundamentally a very different approach, because they're not necessarily going to be regulations coming out first from the US. when it comes to violations of these things. They'll use the existing laws and say, this is how you screwed it up. The tax laws, the securities laws, etc. I'm sorry, go ahead, Alessandro.
No, but that's the same thing in Europe.
Yeah.
I actually, I think it was in the executive order yesterday, there was a term that was used that, if it's the same thing, we're going to use the same laws. And in Europe, they're using the same approach. I think where you're going to see a difference is what you mentioned before was, how do we define identity? How do we communicate identity?
Oh,
There are a whole, we're talking, when Anja was talking before, she was talking about, sending money to the Ukraine. Great. But are those nonprofits doing the AML KYC to know what money is, where that money is coming from?
This is an interesting question, though, Alessandro. I can tell you firsthand. I can tell you firsthand. So the IRS space actually offers quite a lot of information about the nonprofits. There's 501c3s, and you have a status, and if you receive the money, basically you know who you're sending the money to, but as long as that money goes to the bank account. So now we're sending crypto across, and there is no base, there is no database that we can actually check whether that crypto address actually, is of the specified nonprofit organization, if it belongs to it. We're the one basically creating that database in the first hand. That's one thing. The other thing is, as soon as we moved out of the US, we figured out that there is no IRS database. Europe, for once, it's very scattered. And I'm actually quite happy to hear about the regulation and the MiCA approaching, because it brings the harmonization in place to some extent. We now are dealing with pluralization. We now are dealing with every single state has its own regulation. We don't know where to begin with. You want to be incorporated in Spain, and then the regulation in Germany actually applies to your project. Same goes for US, basically, because the long arm principle applies. So if you're having the investors from the US, the regulation right now, it has never been so plural before. And besides that, you actually not only have the states, you also have the corporations actually playing this game as well, because with the sanctions now, what we've seen in the war actually is that the corporations have started playing their part as well. They've also proposed their own sanctions and are sort of playing a role of a regulator in this space. So we're being regulated from all over the place, while still not having proper databases that would actually function or offer the proper data to the private individuals, to the corporations, to the organizations to actually prevent scams from happening. So once we started creating these flows of donations for elsewhere, not just the US, the first thing that we've actually noticed is that we can't really do the KYC or KYB. We spoke with plenty of KYB providers, and every single one of them got actually scared, because we said, well, we want to actually send donations to the nonprofits. And it's not the usual KYB that they can actually conduct. It's not the same individuals that are going to be receiving the money, and there's no possibility or no process for them to double check whether the name and the crypto address actually obtained from the process of KYB is going to be matched with the ones provided from the official databases. Sometimes they could do that, right? If we are playing the regular KYC or KYB game, sure, they could do that, but not with the nonprofits, and not if we actually leave the US. So we go back to the point where, sure, the states should actually, not the states as US states, but literally the governments of all the world should be paying attention to how we create digital twins of everything that we already have. So if we're talking about having a database of all this information in place, can we open that database, and can we actually make it even bigger so that it holds the digital identities of all these corporations and nonprofits? Or can we actually now be speaking not only about having the information about the bank accounts, but also about the crypto accounts, so that we make this environment a safe haven for everybody? It goes both hands in hand, and it's not only about the existing regulation and the new ones, it's actually about both of them coming into existence. And I think that we see it plenty of times, that it's not only that the regulators actually wish to have that KYB and the transfer of data, but it's also about the corporations. So we, for example, had the experience with one of the platforms conducting the KYC on the platform so that they could create profiles for their users. But then the KYC had to be conducted yet again once they wanted to use the on-ramp and once they wanted to put the money onto their digital wallet. And because it wasn't the same provider for KYC, they had to demand from the users to do the KYC twice on their own platform. So this demand of exchanging the information about who has conducted the KYC already and whether that person has already been verified, this is also coming from the corporates themselves, from the platform creators. I don't want, as a user, I don't want to do the KYC 3 times or 2 times. I just want to do it once, and that should be enough. Maybe not even on every single platform I use. I want to do it once and then have that KYC used everywhere. And this is why we're constantly talking about the global ID, bright ID, and these types of authentications where I actually create one digital identity that can be used elsewhere just based on my consent. But yeah, let's not even go
but
there.
we also have other tools. You know, these are packets. They're packets that are leaving my device and going into the internet. You know, unless I'm encrypting my packets, you know, my IP addresses, you know, everything that goes into sending packets. You know, you can know what machine it's coming from. You know it's coming from my machine as opposed to your machine. So there are, you know, otherwise Chainanalysis or even these other analytics companies, they want to have a business. You know, they're using other means that don't require you to do, you know, to define your identity in exactly the same manner. And of course, there are networks or, yes.
If I can add something very, very quickly. Identity has been mentioned a lot of times. I think that a very important point to stress is that today we do not necessarily have to do identity like it was done 20 years ago. I mean, crypto was possible because of advancements in cryptography and in consensus theory and other kind of things, and these things kept advancing. I think that a very important point is that today we have things like zero knowledge proofs, namely snarks and starks that have been also used to do, you know, privacy coins and things like that. But the point is that I can prove cryptographically that some condition is true without revealing anything about that condition. So the point is, if there is a list of people, of identities that, you know, are whitelisted and they are, for instance, granted the right to trade transactions, for instance, I could create a system of KYC when I give you the money and I do not tell you anything about who I am. I just provide you a zero knowledge proof that says that my identity is in that list. And at that point, you don't know anything about me. You just know what you need to know. That is, I am authorized to do business legally. And I think this would be a much better way of setting up things instead of having, you know, identity registries that are centrally managed, that can be stolen, and things like that. I mean, I'm not the most paranoid person ever. I'm actually not paranoid at all, but it happens all the time that, you know, some clerk in the public administration does something wrong, and I don't know, maybe your certificate of marriage or your certificate of you being born disappears, and it takes a lot of time to find it back and whatever. I think all these things should be managed in a decentralized way, exactly as crypto does. And today we have the tools to do that while still guaranteeing the privacy of all the people using these things. And that seems to me the easiest way to get a global system that is censorship resistant, resilient, and basically keeps your privacy safe.
So this is a potentially like transformative idea, even though it's a technical idea, right? Because all the examples we're using about identity come from are a national identity or perhaps local, right? And on a fundamental level, you're talking about like an identity that transcends borders. Over time, that's going to change a lot of the way people deal with the world, at least has the potential to. Some things are always going to be local because we live locally. Yeah. But if the way we interact with the world is no longer local, if it's no longer about going to the government office for your driver's license as much, then that's that's potentially very transformative. Now,
I think that the main thing is to say, what do you need identity for? So, when you say we need to collect identities, then the obvious question to ask is, why do you need to collect identities? We need to collect identities to make sure that someone is, I don't know, allowed to trade. If that's the case, everything you need is a proof that someone is on a list and nothing more. And as soon as you start reasoning in these terms, it becomes way easier to generalize and to leverage technology to create something sensible. So yeah.
So Fab, this is a little bit of an inelegant segue, but I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the sanctions. We touched on the various points in this, but one of the big things that's come out of the Ukrainian war are the massive sanctions that are coming down on Russia related to the pursuit of this war in the first place. Now, there's been a lot of talk about how crypto can maybe do an end around on these sanctions, but I know you've thought about it, and I want you to talk to us about it.
Yeah. So I think we have to distinguish. I mean, if you look at what's happening in crypto at the moment, you can see that prices of some crypto assets in the last days or so spiked on some Russian exchanges. I think this is mainly due to the ruble being, going really down in the stock market, and a lot of common people trying to basically save their savings and converting part of their savings in crypto. We saw this multiple times. It also happened in Venezuela, in Argentina, basically in every country where you have a deep financial crisis of some sort. Even if crypto is very volatile, then it becomes an appealing asset to store your wealth into. A very important thing that I heard is that people are recurring to crypto because compared to other foreign currencies, is not owned by a bank. So basically, no one can really steal your crypto away from you as long as it's on a cold wallet. So if you are really very suspicious about what your government may be doing in the future, if you're a Russian citizen and the war goes terribly wrong, even more than it's doing now, then you may say, okay, I do prefer crypto because it's not sizable. Aside of that, there is the problem of people saying that sanctions can be avoided using crypto. And then again, I think we should, for a second, try to realize the scale of things and which kind of actors may be willing to use crypto to do so. So the first thing probably to clarify, and there are people much better than me in this call to clarify this further, want us to understand how sanctions work. And basically, for what I understand, there is a country basically keeps a list of people or entities or companies that are sanctioned. That means, like, for instance, you may not be allowed to do business with, for instance, a person like, I don't know, like a Russian oligarch that is on this list. When that's the case, it doesn't matter what kind of currency you use, because in any case, you are committing a crime if you do business with those people. You can do it in you can transact in ruble, in euro, in dollar, in Bitcoin, doesn't matter. So that doesn't really apply. When you look at things at a statewide level, like if the ruble is going really bad, can Russia resort to crypto instead? I think that when you run the numbers, there's simply not enough crypto in circulation for something like that to happen. In the sense that I saw some estimates that say that if the war in Ukraine goes full scale, Moscow is looking at an expense that could be well over 20 billion per day. At the moment, the total market cap of Bitcoin is around 700 billion. So if prices stay fixed like they are now, and if Russia were to buy all the Bitcoin in circulation at this current price, they could use it probably to fund their war effort for 40 days. So when you realize the scale of things, it's just like it's not a surprise, that states and nations, aside of very small ones, didn't jump already in crypto. There's just simply not enough liquidity for big countries to operate with crypto in a sensible way. So yeah.
Yeah. And related to the sanctions point, to do those transactions, they'd have to conceal them. And to take over the entire market, there's no way they could conceal it. So something I'm aware of from a different angle. The only country I could think of that's facing similar sanctions historically is North Korea, which is isolated financially in enormous ways.
Mm-hmm.
They are much smaller economic power than Russia, but they are also a big player in the Asian cryptocurrency market. North Korean actors steal. The estimate for 2021 was $400 million worth of cryptocurrency they stole. They use that to fund various sanctioned endeavors, including their military nuclear program. They then launder it. But the thing is, all that activity tracked. So Chainanalysis showed in the year where they stole $400 million worth of crypto, they showed over 700% increase in the laundering activity in the Asian markets. None of it could be concealed. And even the 40-day timeline you're talking about, that would be subsuming the entire market. And I own Bitcoin, and for them to do that, I'd have to sell Bitcoin to Russia, which is never going to.
Basically, North Korea stole in a year half of what we pay Russia in gas in a day as Europe.
Yeah.
when you put things into perspective, it's really not that much. And you're right. There are ways to transact privately on the blockchain. There are protocols like Tornado Cash for Ethereum that work exactly with this idea of zero knowledge proof. It's probably worth just saying for 5 seconds how that works. The idea is that you put money into a sort of thing that you can imagine like a huge thing full of drawers, and all these drawers contain the same amount of money. And then when you basically put your money in one of these drawers, you receive a sort of certificate that is a zero knowledge proof that you are entitled to get money from one of those drawers. Then you give this note to the other party that is using that to withdraw the money. And when the person you have to pay goes there with the note, the idea is that they say, I don't know, I am sure that one of these drawers is mine, but I don't know which one. I mean, it's not, at that point, it's not necessary to know which one it is because they're all the same. So the point is that this thing breaks the kind of cause-effect link because you cannot be sure that, who deposited and who took from the thing. So if 100 people deposit at the same time and, they wait like each 10 days, around 10 days before withdrawing the funds, then it becomes impossible to link the withdrawals with the deposits. But obviously, this works only if there are many people that are making deposits of the same amount of money. And the biggest kind of amount you can deposit now is 100 ETH. That is like 200K or something similar. That wouldn't be, even close to be enough for any, not even the state, or even just like a mid-sized Russian oligarch. So again, I don't think that these kind of privacy ensuring protocols are being conceived and implemented with that kind of wealth in mind. And so it cannot really be used, I think, in any way.
May I just comment here or ask a question? It's not directly linked, but I think it's fascinating, at least to me, the news of the DAO hacker that was issued by Grokchain. I think it was like a few weeks ago, and the Chainanalysis was helping with the analysis there when he was actually putting his money into Tornado Cash. Can you comment on that?
I didn't follow the thing very closely, but I mean, this thing is only breaking the chain of transactions or of coins on the blockchain, but there are a lot of other factors to consider. So as Alessandro was saying before, if I use Tornado Cash with an IP and I withdraw with same IP, they can still, say, okay, these two transactions started from the same machine, and then they can link me in any case. Sometimes it happens that, these hackers maybe set up things correctly. They set up Tornado Cash correctly. They have Tor to hide their IPs and whatever, but then they are active on like Discord servers and things like that. And they have their Twitter handles and nicknames, and sometimes they just slip. And it's, like they may be mentioning that they need this money to pay their college, for instance. And even if it's just, breadcrumbs, there are amazingly gifted and skilled people whose job is exactly putting all these small details together. And it may look like nothing, but as soon as you connect the dots, yeah, it becomes possible to link the identities.
Other angle too, which is there are huge social media companies that are expending enormous engineering resources to be able to reconcile the identity of people. So even with all those steps you're talking about, they're often interacting with Google or Facebook or one of these other things from the same machines. And those entities can figure out who they are and reconcile it back to the same masking techniques. Yeah. So the identity will be figured out.
Google really logs everything you do. Like they even log the size of your screen, of your display. They basically suck all the data from your machine. So even if you are behind Tor, for instance, you can give away your identity by just looking at the pattern of Google searches that you do. So, okay, he's searching this kind of topics that are strictly related to what this other person is searching, and their display sizes match. So you see, yeah, it's way more difficult.
And there's huge money behind it, because reconciling that you're the same person drives their advertising revenue. Because there are people who are going to be targeting advertising for, I don't know, hacker bros, right? And so they want to make sure you're the same hacker bro who's interested in the same stuff that the ads can be pushed out for. Mm-hmm. Now, with all that in mind, with the idea of this identity and also the isolation and sanctions, Andrej, I want to ask you, now that we're facing a situation where Russia's increasingly being locked off from the crypto world, at least the development world, what are we going to see? What's the future here? What are the consequences of this for actual blockchain innovation?
Also, like the best thing outside of today's talk is that crypto seems to be good at protecting an individual, like allowing you to transact, but it's really bad because of its transparency to hide major things. So like you are not using crypto to break sanction on a large scale. And here the tragic thing is that a lot of developers and people that have nothing to do with the war or with any activity that should be sanctions are going to get sanctioned right now through this. And how crypto would help? Well, it cannot. While you might be able to transact with someone in Russia with crypto, as Anja said before, if you are in Russia and you are trying to donate to someone that can be linked to something that the country sanctions, you might be in huge trouble. It's also the other way around. So while it's not possible to stop a cryptographic transaction, on the other hand, it's very traceable, and it's not a tool to avoid or to hide or to do anything criminal in an efficient way. So it's an eye-opener that this is good for helping people, getting funds for charity, but really not good for illicit behavior. So it's but the thing is, it's just a technology. It's not a solution. We still have all the challenges that we have, and it just might expose that it's still, we live in a world that's governed by governments, by law, by armies. And while an individual that has his assets in crypto might be much better off to flee the country or to use his funds, this is not a new world that solves everything. So people that are now stuck within the sanctions are going to suffer from them, and crypto is not offering any solution right now. So if I'm a company working with Russia, I'm not going to use crypto to pay anything and risk going against the sanctions, especially because this is like a transparent and pretty much a forever traceable thing I'll be doing. So it's like, it's interesting, it's eye-opening, and I hope that like we settle the debate about, so we had so many of these hacks, which were all at the end discovered. We got to the people that were hacking or stealing money and so on. So it's like, I hope that we move from the idea that this is just for some hidden behavior for crime and so on. And as Fabrizio said, yes, we can have, like with Ziki proofs, we can have like a way to be able to transact privately, but A, we are not there yet. B, this is meant to protect your privacy, not for some large-scale criminal activity or in any way not to finance a war or anything. So this is like super interesting times we are in. And I hope also the legislatures get to understand and know like the potential use of crypto, and maybe like go down a notch about just saying about crime, because this is really not the best tool for you. It's like, it's something, it is what it is. You know, it allows us to transact in a way that government cannot stop a single transaction, but that doesn't change the game.
I think probably one thing we should focus on that is not super directly related to crypto is that some of the sanctions we saw recently against Russia are sanctions that, you know, are pretty much one shot. What I mean is that, for instance, excluding Russia from the SWIFT circuit is the kind of sanction that will immediately, you know, prompt Russia, China, and other countries to set up alternatives, global alternatives to SWIFT. Obviously, like, you know, that's not something that you want to happen again. So it is, I think, possible that in the future the blockchain technology will be employed by states, by countries, but maybe to, I don't know, mint their own coins or financial assets. That I still don't know. But, you know, I'm pretty sure that, you know, as finance has been essentially weaponized in this war, rightfully so, I think, but still, you know, it's been weaponized. Probably there will, you know, in next months, we will see a lot of efforts in trying to find, you know, alternatives that may rely on blockchain that are not as easily weaponizable. So yeah, that's something to be expected, I guess.
And we should also not forget, right, that the whole idea of blockchain did come out of this endeavor or philosophy to bring down the states and to kind of shed light onto how the systemic operations or institutions have not really brought a lot of peace and success to some individuals. And the whole development of Bitcoin blockchain actually happened when the banks collapsed. So that together with the notion that, you know, the more regulations we have, the more individuals and organizations are possibly going to be pushed towards developing even more so decentralized solutions, which at the end might really not be effectively regulated. This whole mentality kind of brings forth a conversation about what role do states even play today, and are they maybe going to play a different role in the future? Are we individuals, the cosmopolitan people, taking back the responsibility and are trying to actually bring together a bit of a different consensus, as in what type of a community does the Web3 really present? And this is not new. This has not only happened with the crypto community or the Web3 really. This has actually been around since John Perry Barlow. He was the one basically, you know, creating this memorandum and saying the internet sovereignty is something we should be all talking about. And I think that the Web3 really emphasizes that idea and brings it a step forward. What is it that we are trying to achieve here? If states are really going to be adopting this technology and creating their own CBDCs, what we are probably going to be designing is just more traceability and more possibilities for them to prevent transactions from ever happening. Swift was just one of the ideas, but if we are really going to be playing these global games, then why is nobody actually talking about releasing Russia from having this veto position in the Security Council with the UN? I think that that would really be effective, but nobody has been talking about it before. And I mean, so far it has prevented from a lot of different ideas going through the Security Council because of that veto position. It's interesting. The world is kind of changing, but it's also perhaps changing because the regulators are simply taking some steps that might be pushing a lot of these new innovative ideas into, the shade gray areas where they're going to be continuing with their innovation, but nobody's actually going to know exactly how it looks like and how should we really be regulating that. So yet again, the community is going to be kind of pushed towards you guys should be self-regulating, just like Lex Mercatoria was supposed to self-regulate the trade in the 16th century. It's really going to be interesting. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad. I mean, the regulation, if there's too much of it, might backfire. That's the fact. But at the same time, if there's not much of it, if countries are just lagging behind, then it looks as if they're not being responsible towards their citizens. So that might backfire as well. I think we should just be finding a bit of a right balance and be not hyperventilated, but just being very much aware of what's happening and trying to find dialogues just like this one. But I do hope that this brings awareness to the regulators and the projects. I mean, it's been really a pleasure seeing that with every ETH conference that has been happening, there's been more and more awareness being brought to the regulation sites and to how we should be obeying the laws and how, for example, projects should be looking into, well, you shouldn't just be building solutions, try be compliant as well. But at the same point, I mean, we were previously speaking about how important it is to think about these private coins, for example, and how people are not going to be able to send crypto transactions because there's a couple of regulated exchanges. Not all exchanges are regulated, and you don't actually have to conceal your transaction. You might as well just be using a decentralized exchange, not with a private coin, but through something that has not yet been regulated and fully licensed. And not actually being fully licensed, to some extent, it might be bringing more liberation and freedom to the innovation, because so far being fully regulated and being fully compliant with the system that has been created, I don't know, the system is the one fighting the war as well. So to some extent, some of the rules should be brought down, but probably more cautiously than we've been seeing it so far.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a conversation about what walls do we need, right? Back to Fab's point, why do you need to know, right? Like, and a lot of times these things harden, these regulations harden just because it's the way it's been. And the war is a terrible thing, but the opportunity in a war is it unsettles things in such a way that you have to go back to those first principles. What is worth having? Why is it there? The promise of this technology allows for a lot of decentralization and the taking away of the nation state's control of these things, but it also has the prospect of a lot of lack of protection. Like at its best, the state protects us, right? and finding the right balance for a new world where maybe identity is non-local, where all these other things are talked about, that's where the fight has to be. And all you guys educating people and getting the conversation going is how we get there. I think we're right up near our time. Does anybody have any last comments they want to make before we sign off?
Yeah, just the last comment, thank you. I really like what you said, Anja, and also the presentation from Fabrizio before. I think it's very important to understand like the difference between what is regulated in a way that would still, I would say, kind of flourish, especially the centralized blockchain and the centralized use cases. So it's going to be easier for everyone to invest. It's going to be easier for, I don't know, big institutions and investors to be a part of this innovation. But at the same time, we have very specific things that we also discussed before, which is like DeFi, decentralized use cases. We're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about privacy preserving technologies. And I think that those are so different and are also different just because the regulation has always been centralized. And just the way how the regulation works is also writing and having something for centralized entities. And this is so different and revolutionary that, of course, we need more time and more education for everyone to understand and to embrace this technology and make them work for us, not even work against us, but maybe use it and use it as an example of how to improve things in general.
Great, a good hopeful note. Fab, do you have anything you want to add? Andrej?
No, I think it's a perfect ending. So like, let's hope the war ends fast.
Yes. Let's let the war end fast and that we can get back to making things better every day instead of just trying to make them not terrible.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you all. This has been Grokchain Conversations. We'll see you again soon.